Why you feel emotionally out of control. I want to begin by saying something that you probably never heard when you needed it the most. There is nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You just never learned how to feel safe. And for a long time, no one said that to me either. When I was 17, I was locked in a seclusion room at a psychiatric hospital. They labeled me with schizophrenia, even though I didn't hear voices or hallucinate. I was suicidal, I self-harmed. I was drowning in emotional pain that I couldn't explain, pain no one seemed to understand. But more than anything, I felt invisible, like my pain was too much for the world. And so I began to believe that maybe I was too much. Maybe you've felt that way too. Too emotional, too sensitive, too needy, too intense. But here's the truth that took me decades and a lifetime of work to learn. You are not too much. You are someone who feels deeply in a world that discourages depth. Most people are taught to hide their feelings, to perform, to pretend, to smile while dying inside. But you couldn't do that. And that made you vulnerable, but it also made you real. And the world doesn't always know what to do with people who are real. So let me share with you what I've learned after over 50 years of working with people just like you. When your emotions feel out of control, it's not because you're weak or broken or defective. It's because no one taught you how to handle those emotions. You were probably raised in what I call an invalidating environment, where your feelings were ignored, dismissed, mocked, or punished. You may have heard things like, "Don't be so dramatic," or "You're too sensitive," or "Just get over it." And maybe the worst one of all, "Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about." So you started to doubt your own inner world. You started wondering, maybe I really am crazy, but you're not. You're just emotionally sensitive, and no one taught you how to navigate that sensitivity. That's exactly why I created Dialectical Behaviour Therapy, DBT, because I wanted to give people the skills and tools I never had. Tools to regulate your emotions, to manage distress, and to build real relationships without losing yourself in the process. But before we even get to any of that, you need to understand one thing. This pain you carry, this intensity, this emotional fire, it has a story, it has roots, and it makes perfect sense. So many people come to me and say, "I don't know what's wrong with me." And my answer is always the same. Let's assume just for a moment that nothing is wrong with you. Let's assume that your emotions make perfect sense, and let's try to understand what they're trying to tell you. Because emotions are not the enemy, they're messengers. They are your body's way of saying something matters here. The reason you feel overwhelmed isn't because you feel too much, it's because you were never taught how to feel without falling apart. So if there's one thing I want you to take from this moment, it's this. You are not alone, you are not too much. Your pain makes sense, and healing is possible with the right tools and with time. This isn't about fixing yourself. This is about finally understanding yourself, and that, my friend, is a far more beautiful journey. Let me tell you something I haven't always shared with people. When I was just 17, I made a promise to myself. I said, one day I'm going to get out of this place, and I'm going to come back and get everyone else out too. That promise, made inside a locked psychiatric ward, became the beginning of everything. I had been admitted to the Institute of Living in Connecticut in 1961. Back then, they didn't use words like trauma or emotional sensitivity or complex PTSD. No, they used words like incurable. They labeled me with chronic schizophrenia, and for 21 long days, they placed me in seclusion. A bare room, no human contact, just me, my pain, and a system that had no idea what to do with someone like me. I hurt myself. I banged my head against the wall. I wasn't trying to get attention or manipulate anyone. I was simply trying to stop the pain I couldn't name. If you've ever found yourself in that quiet, hopeless place where your emotions feel too big for your body, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I want you to hear this. You are not alone. I've been there too. When I left the hospital, I wasn't suicidal anymore, but I wasn't free either. I wore a mask. I smiled in public, went to church, got straight A's, all while burning inside. I begged God to change me. And one night, sitting in a chapel, something happened. I looked at the crucifix and whispered, "I love you." And then, to my surprise, I heard myself say, "Marsha, I love you." It was the first time in my life I'd ever felt compassion for myself. That moment changed everything. It marked the beginning of my real healing. I decided to study psychology, not to become a professor, but to figure out what had gone so wrong, to understand the system that had failed me and so many others, and to change it. Years later, I found myself working with women who had the exact same symptoms I once had: suicidal thoughts, self-harm, intense emotions, broken relationships. They had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, a label that many therapists ran from. These women were often called manipulative, resistant, even hopeless. But I saw something different. I saw myself. I knew they weren't difficult. They were dysregulated. They weren't manipulative. They were desperate. They didn't want to die. They wanted the pain to stop. And they had no idea how to make that happen. So I created something new. It wasn't perfect. It took years. I stitched it together from everything I'd learned: mindfulness from my Zen training, behavioral tools from my work in the lab, and compassion from the deepest parts of my own story. The result was Dialectical Behaviour Therapy, or DBT, a treatment that says, you're doing the best you can, and you can do better. You are valid, and you need to change. You are not broken, and you are responsible for your healing. Dialectics. Two truths held at once: validation and accountability, acceptance and change. Because healing isn't either or, it's both. People ask me all the time, why do you think DBT works? And I tell them, because it was created by someone who needed it. I didn't learn about suffering from textbooks, I lived it. So when I tell you you're not alone, I mean it with every cell of my body. I was the girl in the seclusion room, and now I'm the woman who came back with keys. And here's what I want you to remember. If you've survived the impossible, you're not fragile, you're fierce. If you feel deeply, you're not disordered, you're alive. If you're still here, there is still hope. And I promise you, there is a path forward. It's not easy, but it's real, and it works. Emotion dysregulation is not a personality flaw. People often come to me and ask, why do I feel everything so strongly? Or why do I react so quickly? They say things like, why do I feel like I'm always on fire? Like every emotion is too loud, too fast, too much. And my answer is always this: because you were born emotionally sensitive, and you were raised in a world that invalidated your sensitivity. That is not a character flaw, it's a human fact. Let me explain. DBT, or Dialectical Behaviour Therapy, is built on something called the biosocial model, which teaches that your emotional suffering doesn't mean you're weak or broken. It comes from two things. First, a biological predisposition to high emotional sensitivity, and second, an environment that doesn't know how to support or respond to that sensitivity. Let's start with biology. Some people are simply born with a more reactive nervous system. They feel things more deeply, more intensely, and those feelings linger longer than they do for others. Think of it like being born with emotional skin that's paper thin. Every little breeze, whether it's a comment, a glance, or a memory, feels like a hurricane. That sensitivity is not a weakness, it's a trait. And with the right tools, it can even become a powerful gift. But here's where the pain starts. Most emotionally sensitive people grow up in homes or systems that don't know how to respond to that sensitivity. Instead of being supported, they are invalidated. They're told things like, stop crying, you're being dramatic, that didn't happen, you're just making things up, or you're overreacting again. Over time, those messages get internalized. The person begins to believe, maybe my feelings really are wrong, maybe I really am too much. And that belief, not the sensitivity itself, is where emotional dysregulation begins. Let me be clear. When a child's emotions are constantly dismissed, they never learn to trust themselves. They don't learn how to name emotions, how to regulate them, or how to express them in a healthy way. Instead, they either suppress everything until it erupts or they explode without knowing why. Sound familiar? Maybe you're someone who holds everything in until it bursts. Maybe your anger scares you. Maybe you hate yourself after an outburst and promise to be better, but deep down, you don't even know how. That is not a personal failing. It is not weakness. It's a lack of skill, not a lack of worth. And that's what DBT helps address. In DBT, we say this again and again. You're doing the best you can, and you can do better with the right skills. You were never taught how to regulate emotions, how to tolerate distress, or how to identify and express your needs. That doesn't mean you're doomed, it just means you're untrained. And the good news is, training is possible. We have to stop acting like emotional suffering is a moral failure. It's not. Would you shame someone for not knowing how to play the piano if no one ever taught them? Of course not. So why do we shame people for not knowing how to manage their emotions when they've spent their whole lives being told those emotions were wrong? You are not your rage. You are not your panic. You are not your shutdown. Those are survival responses, learned behaviors from a nervous system that had nowhere safe to go. But once you begin to create that safe place within yourself, everything starts to change. That's what DBT does. It doesn't just diagnose, it teaches. It teaches you how to calm yourself without hurting yourself, how to feel without drowning, how to be in relationships without abandoning who you are. So if you're listening right now and thinking, I've ruined everything, I don't know how to feel, I don't even know who I am, I want you to pause, take a breath, and I want you to hear me clearly. You are not broken. You were just never taught, and the best part, you can learn. The 4 DBT skills that save lives. Let's talk about tools, real, usable, life-saving tools. Because insight is important and compassion is important. But when a storm hits, when your heart is racing, when you want to scream or disappear, when you're spiraling and no one is answering the phone, that's not when you need theory. That's when you need a skill. That's exactly why I created DBT. Not to give people labels, but to give them options. Because emotional sensitivity without tools is like handing someone a Ferrari with no brakes. In DBT, we teach 4 core skill sets. I call them the 4 pillars of emotional survival: mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. Let's begin with mindfulness. If your thoughts constantly race, if your past hijacks your present, or if your future terrifies you before it even happens, then mindfulness is your anchor. Mindfulness means observing your inner world, your thoughts, your sensations, your emotions, without judgment. It doesn't mean clearing your mind. It means staying present, gently and curiously. It means being able to say, right now, I'm feeling anxious. My chest is tight, my hands are cold. I don't like it, but I can handle it. That's presence. That's power. Because the moment you name it, you begin to tame it. Next is distress tolerance and the skill of surviving the emotional storm without self-destruction. Life will hurt sometimes. That's not a failure, that's reality. But how you respond to pain can either deepen the wound or allow it to pass. Distress tolerance teaches you how to endure that pain without making things worse. We use techniques like TIPP, which shifts your body chemistry to calm your nervous system. Distraction, not to escape, but to delay destructive behavior. Self-soothing, using your senses to ground yourself in the present. And radical acceptance, not because you love the pain, but because fighting it only prolongs your suffering. Sometimes survival itself is the victory. Sometimes I didn't make it worse is enough. Then there's emotion regulation, mastering your inner weather. You can't stop the storm from coming, but you can learn to build shelter. Emotion regulation helps you recognize your emotional triggers, reduce vulnerability, and respond instead of react. It teaches you to see patterns like, when I don't sleep, I snap, or when I skip meals, my anxiety spikes, or when I isolate, my shame grows. It's not magic, it's management. And when you manage your emotional life with skill and awareness, you start to live it, not just survive it. Finally, we come to interpersonal effectiveness, the skill of loving without losing yourself. Many emotionally sensitive people either please everyone to avoid conflict, push everyone away to avoid rejection, or swing painfully between the two. This skill set teaches you how to hold steady. You learn assertiveness. You learn how to set boundaries. You learn how to ask for what you need and survive the word no. You don't have to become someone else. You learn how to be someone who can care for others and still care for yourself. You learn that you can be soft and strong, kind and clear. That is the heart of dialectics, the dance of DBT. And if these skills sound simple, that's because they are. They're not complicated. They're human. But the truth is, no one teaches them, especially not to the people who need them most. That's what DBT changes. We don't ask, what's wrong with you? We ask, what happened to you? And what are you missing? And most importantly, what can we teach you? Because once you have the right tools, your life no longer has to be ruled by your past. You can respond instead of react. You can choose instead of collapse. You can stay, even when it's hard. So if you've ever felt like a failure for not knowing how to stay calm, how to speak up, or how to stop hurting yourself when it hurts, hear me when I say you can learn, you can change, you can heal, and I'll teach you how. Radical acceptance, the hardest skill of all. If you ask me, Marsha, what's the hardest skill in DBT? I'll tell you without hesitation. It's radical acceptance. It's the one skill people resist the most, and the one that ultimately sets them free, because it goes against everything we've been taught, especially if you've been hurt, abandoned, or betrayed. So let me explain what radical acceptance really is, and what it's not. Radical acceptance means fully and completely accepting reality exactly as it is. Not how you wish it were, not how it should have been, but how it actually is in this moment. It means saying, this happened. This is real. This is where I am. Not because you like it, not because it's fair, not because it doesn't hurt, but because resisting reality doesn't change it. It only adds to the suffering. Let's say someone you love walked away from you, and you keep thinking, they shouldn't have done that. It's not fair. Why did this happen? It wasn't supposed to be this way. And all of that might be true, but none of it changes what is. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is what happens when we refuse to accept the pain. Radical acceptance isn't weakness. It's not giving up. It's not saying, I'm okay with this. It's saying, I don't like this. I didn't choose this, but it's real, and I'm going to stop fighting what already is. What I've learned through my own decades of suffering is that reality is painful, but denial is unbearable. You can't build a better life if you're at war with the present moment. So we start by surrendering, not to hopelessness, but to truth. Because truth, even when it hurts, gives us solid ground. And that's where healing begins. People often ask me, but Marsha, how can I accept abuse? How can I accept that I was unloved, abandoned, or betrayed? And I tell them, you don't accept that it was okay. You accept that it happened. You stop rewriting history. You stop bargaining with the past. You let go of the what ifs and start living in the what now. Because if you don't, you stay stuck, trapped in that loop of pain, plus resistance equals suffering. And here's what I've seen again and again. The moment someone truly accepts what happened, healing begins. They cry, they breathe, their body relaxes, their heart softens. It doesn't mean they're over it. It means they've stopped being at war with it. And that is everything. Radical acceptance is not a one-time event. It's a practice, a choice you make again and again. When the shame returns, you accept it. When the urge to blame resurfaces, you accept it. When you realize how long you've suffered, you accept that too. Not because you wanted any of it, but because you're strong enough to face it now. So if you're hearing these words and holding on to a story, to pain, to resentment or regret or rage, I invite you to say, even just once, this is my life. This happened. I don't like it, but I accept it. And then breathe. Because the moment you stop fighting reality, you create the space to build something new, something better, something real. The real reason you struggle in relationships. If you've ever asked yourself, why do I love too fast, too hard, too painfully? Why do I fear abandonment so deeply? Why do my relationships feel like roller coasters, full of extreme highs and crushing lows? Let me answer you gently but honestly. It's because your relationships are echoing your earliest experiences of love. In DBT, we don't just look at what you do, we ask why. Why do you cling? Why do you push people away? Why do you panic when someone doesn't text back? Why do you shut down when someone gets too close? Here's the truth. You're not needy. You're not cold. You're not crazy. You're scared, and your fear makes sense. Most people who struggle in relationships have one thing in common. They were taught that love is inconsistent. Maybe your caregivers were emotionally unavailable. Maybe they loved you, but only when you were easy. Maybe they left, neglected, or controlled you. So you learned that connection is unpredictable, that safety is conditional, and that love equals anxiety. As an adult, you oscillate. You crave closeness but fear rejection. You want love but expect betrayal. You open up, then panic and run. Or worse, you shapeshift into who others want you to be just so they won't leave. That's not weakness. That's attachment trauma. In DBT, we teach something radical. You have the right to ask for what you need and the responsibility to regulate how you ask. You can love without losing yourself. You can connect without collapsing. You can disagree without fearing abandonment. But to do that, you need skills, not just emotional regulation, but relational clarity. For example, if someone doesn't respond to your message, your heart might race. You spiral. I knew it. They're gone. I'm too much. I ruined it. But instead of reacting, you pause. You practice mindfulness. You notice the thought, but you don't become the thought. You say, my brain is telling me a story, but I don't have proof. I'm feeling abandoned, but maybe I'm not actually being abandoned. That's the skill. We also teach boundary setting. Many emotionally intense people struggle with boundaries because they fear boundaries will push people away. But in reality, boundaries are what make true connection possible. When you know where you end and someone else begins, you can be close without being consumed. You don't need to shrink yourself to be loved. You don't need to explode to be heard. You don't need to test people to feel secure. You can be honest, you can be assertive, you can be fully yourself and still be loved. DBT teaches interpersonal effectiveness, not manipulation, not the silent treatment, not emotional collapse, but clear, respectful, powerful communication. Here's what I feel. Here's what I need. Here's what I can accept and what I can't. And you'll be amazed at what happens when you show up that way. Not everyone will stay, but the right ones will. And you'll finally know what it feels like to love without fear. So if you're tired of chasing love, tired of shrinking, exploding, or aching, please remember you are not unlovable. You are just learning to trust, learning to express, learning to stay with yourself and with others. And that's a kind of love worth fighting for. How to stop the self-hate spiral. Let me ask you something personal. What's the voice inside your head saying right now? Is it kind or is it cruel? Does it say, I'm proud of you for trying? Or does it whisper, you're worthless, you're broken, you'll never get this right? If it's the second one, you're not alone. I've heard that voice too. And for years I believed it was me. But here's what I've learned. That voice isn't your truth. It's your trauma. It's every judgment you've ever absorbed and turned inward. So many people who come to DBT aren't just struggling with emotions, they're drowning in shame. Shame for feeling too much, shame for not being normal, shame for what they've done or failed to do, shame for simply existing. And shame is heavy. It silences you, it disconnects you, it convinces you that the world would be better without you. But that is a lie. Here's what I want you to understand, not just with your mind, but with your heart. You were not born hating yourself. You learned to. You learned it from how people spoke to you. You learned it when your pain was met with punishment. You learned it when the people who should have loved you the most didn't know how. And then in a brilliant act of survival, you began to judge yourself before others could. Because if you could fix yourself, maybe they'd finally stay. Maybe they'd finally love you. But judging yourself doesn't keep you safe. It keeps you stuck. In DBT, we don't fight the inner critic with blind positivity. We fight it with validation and compassion. When a client says, I hate myself, I don't argue. I say, of course you do. You were taught to. But let's talk to that part. Let's find out why it's so loud. And usually that part is terrified. It's trying to protect you. It believes that if it just keeps yelling, you'll stay safe, stay small, stay unnoticed, and therefore unhurt. But what if safety isn't in shrinking, but in accepting? We teach a skill in DBT called the non-judgmental stance. It means observing what you think and feel without labeling it as bad or wrong. It means saying, I notice I'm feeling shame. I notice I'm judging myself. And I'm going to meet that with curiosity, not cruelty. It's not easy, but it's life-changing because every time you pause and say, I'm doing the best I can, you're rewiring your brain away from shame and towards self-trust. You don't heal by hating the parts of you that were hurt. You heal by listening to them, by saying, I see you. I understand why you feel this way, but you don't have to protect me like that anymore. We're safe now. We're learning new ways. That's the voice I want you to develop. Not perfection, not forced positivity, just presence, just patience. So if you've spent years beating yourself up, please try this, just for one day. Every time you catch that voice of self-hate, whisper back, not today. I'm learning, I'm healing, I'm here. And then do something gentle. Drink some water, step outside, hold your own hand. because you are not a project to be fixed. You are a person to be understood. And the more you understand yourself, the less you'll want to punish yourself. Relapse isn't failure, it's part of healing. Let me tell you something you may not want to hear, but absolutely need to. You will fall down again. And that doesn't mean you're broken, it means you're human. Healing is not a straight line, it's a spiral. It's messy. It loops and dips and circles back to the very thing you thought you had already dealt with. And that's okay. In DBT, we teach this over and over. Progress includes relapse. It includes setbacks. It includes bad days, sometimes a lot of them. Because learning new skills isn't just about remembering, it's about rewiring. You're not just learning how to regulate your emotions. You're unlearning years of self-blame, silence, and survival. And that takes time. I've had clients come to me in tears saying, I used the skills for 2 months, I was doing great, and then I cut again, I screamed, I lashed out, I failed. And I always say the same thing, you didn't fail, you fell. And now we get up again, together. Because here's the truth, relapse is information, not identity. It's not, I'm back to zero. It's, something got too overwhelming. I didn't have the tools yet. What do I need to learn from this? We don't punish in DBT, we analyze, we stay curious, not cruel. We ask, what triggered this? What skills did I forget to use? What can I add next time? And then we try again. Here's something else that matters. Perfection is the enemy of healing. If you expect yourself to recover without messiness, you're setting yourself up for shame. Recovery means crying at midnight and still getting up in the morning. It means panicking, then breathing. It means lashing out, then apologizing. It means hurting and still choosing to try. When I was a young woman lying on the floor of a locked hospital room, I didn't think I'd survive. But I did. Not because I never fell again, but because I kept getting up. And every time I got up, I learned a little more. I became a little stronger. I trusted myself a little deeper. That's how real transformation happens. Not in leaps, but in steps. So if you've relapsed, emotionally, behaviorally, spiritually, please hear me. You are not starting over. You are starting from experience. Your effort still counts. Your progress is still real, and you are still worthy of healing. Don't let one hard day erase months of work. Don't let one old behavior convince you that you haven't changed, because the person you are today, the one who can notice, who can reflect, who even wants to grow, that person is already a miracle. There's a phrase I love from DBT. You can't fail at healing. You can only stop trying. And I know you won't stop, because you're here. You're listening, you're learning, and that is more than enough. You are not a problem to solve. You are a person to love. So here we are. You've heard my story. You've walked through the pain. You've learned the skills. You've faced the shame. You've sat with the shadow. Now what? Now you live. But not the way you used to. Not surviving, not pretending, not hiding. You live as a whole person. And let me be very clear about something before we end. You are not broken. You were never broken. You were doing the best you could with what you had. And now you have more. You have tools. You have language. You have space between stimulus and response. You have options. That means when the storm hits again, because it will, you won't drown. You'll float. You'll ground. You'll breathe. You'll say, this is hard, but I've felt this before, and I know how to ride it out. That's the power of DBT. Not the elimination of emotion, but the transformation of your relationship to emotion. And as you go forward, I want you to remember this. You are not here to be perfect. You are not here to please everyone. You are not here to erase your past. You are here to live, to feel, to connect, to grow. You are here to hold two truths at once. I am doing the best I can, and I can do better. That is the dialectic. That is freedom. I built DBT for people who were told they were too much, too dramatic, too unstable, too emotional. I built it for the ones who were misdiagnosed, misunderstood, mistreated. I built it for the girl I used to be, alone, terrified, unloved. I built it for you. So if you've ever wanted to disappear, don't. Because the world doesn't need a quieter, smaller, more normal version of you. The world needs your truth, your sensitivity, your fire, your grit, your voice. But most of all, the world needs you healed. Because when people like you heal, you light the way for others. So here's what I want you to do next. Practice the skills, even when you don't need them. Validate yourself. even when no one else does. Stay mindful, especially when you want to run. Build connections, not just with others, but with your own soul, because the real therapy is not just in the sessions, it's in the living. Every breath, every choice, every pause, every boundary, every self-honoring moment is therapy. You are not a diagnosis. You are not a case file. You are not a problem to fix. You are a person to love. And if you can start to love yourself, even just a little, then everything changes. That's what I wanted when I was 17, sitting on the floor of that psychiatric hospital, to come back and get everyone else out too. And now I'm handing the keys to you. Use them, grow, fall, rise, speak, heal, because this world needs you, not perfect, not polished, but present, just as you are.